A 9-year-old girl giving birth in a delivery room with the focus on a kind-hearted male student. The secret behind her childlike appearance shocks doctors. An extremely rare story unfolds from a shocking incident when a 9-year-old girl suddenly went into labor at the hospital, leading to the wrongful suspicion of the compassionate student. The story reveals a horrifying secret about the true identity of the 9-year-old girl who suffers from a rare condition affecting her appearance. Facing the harsh reality of being abandoned by her fiancé and societal prejudices, can true love help her overcome everything to find happiness? Will the man who brought her to give birth be wrongfully accused? Join us follow this dramatic, touching, and deeply humane story. The screeching sound of ambulance wheels echoed sharply in front of Peaceful Haven Hospital, shattering the quiet afternoon atmosphere. The ambulance door flung open, and Paul, a man in his 30s with a distraught face and sweat dripping, rushed out like an arrow. He no longer maintained his usual calm demeanor. His eyes were bloodshot with worry and fear. In his arms, he carefully carried a small, fragile figure wrapped in a thin blanket. It was Emily, his young English teacher, now writhing in pain, her childlike face contorted, her large, round eyes brimming with tears. Her belly was unusually large for her petite frame, barely over 3.6 feet tall, as if a child were bearing a burden far too heavy. "Doctor, please save my wife." Paul's desperate cry echoed through the crowded hospital lobby, ignoring the shocked, curious, and even annoyed stares around him. Patients waiting for their appointments turned in surprise, eyes fixed on him and the tiny figure in his arms. Nurses, busy with their tasks, froze at the sight. A young nurse, likely new to the job, hurriedly pushed a wheelchair forward. "What's going on, sir? Please calm down and place her on the wheelchair," she said, her voice trembling slightly. She tried to maintain professionalism, but couldn't hide her shock upon seeing Emily's condition. How could a girl like this be in this state? She pushed aside the chaotic thoughts in her mind, feeling a surge of anger as she noticed Emily was in labor. Paul, nearly in tears, spoke in a broken voice filled with helplessness and despair. "Please, we need help now. She's in so much pain," he stammered, trying to explain, but his throat tightened. Without a moment's hesitation, the nurse shouted into her walkie-talkie, "Emergency room. Prepare a stretcher at the main entrance." The shrill sound from the device heightened the tension. While waiting for the stretcher, the nurse tried to comfort Emily, who seemed on the verge of passing out from pain. "Hold on, dear. The doctors are coming. We'll help you," she said gently, though she felt a mix of anger and confusion. The situation was beyond her imagination. How could a girl who looked like a middle schooler be pregnant and about to give birth? When the stretcher arrived, the medical staff carefully placed Emily on it. Paul tried to follow her into the emergency room, but an older, more experienced nurse stopped him. "Sorry, sir. Please stay outside and wait. We'll take care of her," she said firmly, yet with some sympathy. "We need to know what happened. Are you her family?" Paul nodded rapidly, his eyes fixed on the closing emergency room doors. A mix of pain, despair, and vague guilt was evident on his face. She's my responsibility," he whispered, his words heavy with the gravity of the situation. He couldn't leave Emily alone in there, but he knew he could do nothing but wait. Inside the emergency room, doctors and nurses worked tirelessly to stabilize Emily's condition. Dr. Thomas, an experienced doctor, had never encountered such a bizarre case. As he scrubbed his hands for what might be the most extraordinary delivery of his career, he couldn't help but think that this shift, which he assumed would be routine, had turned into something unimaginable. "What kind of monster could do this to a child?" he muttered, his eyes blazing with anger. Though he didn't know the full story, the image of the tiny girl with a swollen belly fueled his deep indignation. Meanwhile, in the waiting area, whispers turned into audible conversations as people tried to make sense of what they had witnessed. A middle-aged pregnant woman, pale with disbelief, said to someone nearby, "My God, that girl can't be older than 10, can she? How did this happen?" Another man chimed in, his voice dripping with contempt. "That guy with her, looking all polished and proper, how could he do something so despicable? It's got to be him." "Who else? He's a beast and the police should lock him up for good." Another angry voice added, "How can someone be so depraved?" The accusations and judgments stabbed at Paul like invisible knives. He sat hunched in a corner, head bowed, hands clutching his head as if to block out the venomous words around him. He knew he couldn't let others' words affect him. Emily's health was the priority. But how could he not feel hurt or wronged by the harsh words piercing his ears? He wanted to shout that they were mistaken, that the truth wasn't what they thought, but his throat was tight, unable to utter a word. Inside the operating room, Dr. Thomas approached Emily, using his gentlest voice to reassure her before administering anesthesia. "Don't worry, we'll do everything we can to help you and the baby," he said with determination, though questions still lingered in his mind. The medical team prepared for any unexpected complications. Nurses moved swiftly, bringing necessary equipment, their focus solely on the small girl on the operating table. One question echoed in their minds. Why was a young girl like this in such a tragic situation? Time seemed to stand still, and the hospital atmosphere grew thick with tension and silent anticipation. Only the whispers and gossip outside continued, filling the space with a mix of anger, curiosity, and unhealthy voyeurism. But at the heart of this tragedy was a small girl battling pain and a medical team fighting to save her and her unborn child. Paul felt each passing second stretch like a century. He clasped his hands, praying for Emily and the baby's safety, unable to imagine what would happen if things went wrong. The weight of responsibility crushed him, making it hard to breathe. He knew that whatever the outcome, his and Emily's lives would never be the same. The waiting area grew increasingly stifling. Paul sat on the cold chair, head bowed, hands clasped tightly, trying to ignore the piercing stares and increasingly bold whispers. He felt the hostility and contempt from those around him. A 37-year-old man with a stable job and social standing, he had never faced such a horrific and unjust situation. What kind of person lacks all humanity? An older woman with a kind face, now contorted with anger, said loudly, arms crossed, "They should arrest that guy right now. He can't be allowed to roam free." Her words ignited the crowd's fury. "Exactly," a young man added, glaring at Paul with hatred. "We can't let this slide. Someone call the police." A nurse who had been observing the situation approached Paul. "Sir," she said, trying to stay calm but with a stern edge, "we need to know exactly what happened to that girl." Paul looked up, his eyes filled with despair. "Emily needs help. That's what matters most right now," he said hoarsely, mustering his remaining strength. He knew he needed to explain, but would anyone believe him in this situation? Or would they only grow more contemptuous, thinking he was making excuses? The nurse nodded, perhaps realizing she couldn't get more information now. "We'll do everything we can to help her," she said, trying to reassure him before returning to her duties, though her eyes remained wary. The accusations continued unabated. "Everyone, please keep it down," a senior nurse intervened, trying to maintain order. "This is a hospital. We need to focus on the patients, but we can't ignore this outrageous situation." A young woman responded, glaring at Paul with disdain. How could someone do something so heartless? The waiting room buzzed with murmurs of agreement. Some people pulled out their phones, likely to call the police. The pressure mounted, and Paul felt cornered, closing his eyes to block out the sounds and sights around him. Suddenly, a tall, burly man with a stern face stood up and strode toward Paul. Without a word, he grabbed Paul's collar, lifting him effortlessly from the chair. "You scum! Are you even human?" the man roared, his face red with rage. "What did you do to that girl?" Paul, shocked and scared, flailed his arms in a reflexive surrender. "No, wait, you don't understand," he stammered, his voice trembling. "Let go, there's nothing to understand," the man growled, tightening his grip. "You're a monster, and you'll pay for this." The situation spiraled into chaos. A nurse rushed to intervene, squeezing between them. "Stop! Let him go!" she shouted. "We've called the police. They'll handle this." The angry man released Paul with a forceful shove, sending him stumbling back into the chair. The nurse quickly checked if Paul was hurt, then turned to the man. "I understand your anger, but we can't have violence here. Let the authorities handle it." Paul, gasping for breath, tried to regain his composure. He knew he couldn't change others' minds right now. He had to stay strong for Emily. Minutes later, 2 police officers in crisp uniforms entered the waiting area, responding to the flood of calls from witnesses. They approached Paul with serious professional expressions. "Sir, you need to come with us to the station," one officer said, placing a firm but non-threatening hand on Paul's shoulder. "But Emily, she needs me," Paul protested, his voice breaking. "We need to investigate what's happening here," the other officer added. "But first, you need to come with us to clarify some details." With a heavy heart and a mind tangled with worry, Paul stood, staggering as he followed the officers. The whispers and judgmental stares continued to surround him. He knew he had to explain the truth, but all he could think about was Emily's safety and the hope that the doctors could save her and the baby. The journey from the hospital to the police station felt like a walk of shame. Each step Paul took echoed heavily in his mind, a reminder of the situation's gravity. The murmurs and contemptuous glances from passers-by felt like poisoned arrows piercing his soul. A decent man, a teacher, now treated like a dangerous criminal. Who could he turn to with this injustice? And more importantly, how was Emily? Did she know what was happening to him? Thousands of questions swirled in Paul's mind, nearly breaking him. The police station was cold and unfamiliar. Paul was led to a small interrogation room with faded gray walls, devoid of warmth. The harsh fluorescent light overhead made the space feel even more oppressive. A metal table and a few rigid chairs heightened his sense of isolation and despair. The clink of handcuffs as an investigator gestured for him to sit felt like a knife cutting through his fragile endurance. The cold metal on his wrists was unfamiliar and humiliating. "Please, sit," said a sharp-looking female investigator with neatly cropped hair, introducing herself as Nancy, the lead investigator. Beside her was a stern, quiet male colleague named Henry. In front of them was a thick file, likely filled with accusations from the hospital crowd. "We've received reports of a very serious incident you're alleged to have caused," Henry began, his voice steady but authoritative. "We want to hear your side of the story. You have the right to remain silent, but anything you say can be used as evidence." Paul took a deep breath, trying to calm his racing heart. This was his only chance to tell the truth and clear his name. "Officers," he began, his voice steady but trembling with suppressed emotion. "Emily, the girl brought to the hospital, isn't a child." The investigators exchanged glances, a flicker of surprise crossing their faces, quickly replaced by skepticism. "What do you mean?" Nancy asked, frowning. "Emily is my English teacher," Paul continued, choosing his words carefully. "She's 27 years old." He saw the doubt in their eyes but pressed on. "She has a rare pituitary disorder that makes her look like a young girl. She may look like a child, but she's the best English teacher in this city, incredibly kind and knowledgeable. He recounted that afternoon's lesson, how Emily suddenly cried out in pain and nearly fainted after an hour. I was terrified and didn't know what to do except rush her to the hospital, he said, his face contorting as he recalled the moment. He hesitated, then added sadly, "She once mentioned she was in a long-term relationship and was about to get married. I don't even know who in her family to contact because she rarely talked about her personal life." The investigators remained impassive, exchanging unreadable glances. "You expect us to believe this far-fetched story?" Henry said, his tone slightly mocking. "It sounds like a well-prepared excuse." "It's not an excuse," Paul insisted urgently, his voice rising. "Just wait until she wakes up. She'll tell you everything herself." He added quickly, "I've seen her medical diagnosis. It confirms her pituitary disorder." Nancy leaned forward, her eyes piercing. "Then why hasn't anyone heard of this condition before? And why is there no one to corroborate your story?" She raised a hand to stop Paul from speaking. "From our perspective, this situation looks very different." The suspicion and pressure in the small room were palpable. Just then, the interrogation room door swung open. A middle-aged man in a sharp suit, exuding confidence, stepped in. "I'm Lawyer David," he announced firmly. "I represent my client, Mr. Paul. I request a private discussion with him." His arrival was a ray of hope for Paul. The investigators, slightly taken aback, couldn't refuse the legitimate request. They reluctantly left, leaving Paul and his lawyer alone. David sat across from Paul, his face a mix of concern and determination. "Paul, I've spoken briefly with Emily at the hospital," he began. "She's stable and trying to manage the situation." A wave of relief washed over Paul's face. "But you need to stay calm and trust we'll clear this up." Thank you so much," Paul whispered, his voice breaking with emotion. "This is a terrible misunderstanding." "I know," David replied firmly. "But we need evidence to prove it. I'm working to gather Emily's medical records and contact her previous doctors." He looked at Paul encouragingly. "Tell me everything in detail. Every piece of information could help." After listening carefully to Paul's story, David nodded. "Rest assured, I'll do my best." When the investigators returned, David stood with a commanding presence. "Officers, my client has the right to legal representation," he said, handing over documents supporting Emily's medical condition. Henry examined them closely, his face still stern. "This is just the beginning," he said firmly. "We need to verify every detail, and until then, Paul will remain in custody for the investigation." "That's not fair," Paul protested, despair creeping back. "Emily needs my support. I'm a victim of this situation too." "I understand," Henry replied, still skeptical. "But until we verify everything, we must proceed cautiously." Paul felt like he was falling into an abyss. Despite having David by his side, the prospect of continued detention and being treated as a criminal while Emily was alone in the hospital was unbearable. He looked at David pleadingly, but received only a slight headshake and a firm gaze urging him to stay calm and cooperate. The road to proving his innocence seemed fraught with challenges. While Paul faced baseless accusations and the harshness of the law, Emily was enduring her most critical moments at Peaceful Haven Hospital. Her tiny, childlike frame with a protruding belly was rushed into the delivery room. The extraordinary situation left even seasoned medical staff whispering in shock and concern. The bright operating room lights illuminated Emily's pale, sweat-soaked face. She clenched her teeth, enduring relentless waves of pain. Dr. Thomas, the lead doctor that night, known for his calm and skilled hands, hurried to the delivery room. His mind raced with unanswered questions. He had seen many unusual cases, but this was an unprecedented challenge. What could have happened to a girl like this? He wondered repeatedly. Knowing now wasn't the time for speculation. With 2 lives in his hands, he ordered an emergency C-section. The nurses and surgical assistants moved swiftly and professionally, preparing instruments, checking Emily's vitals, and sterilizing the surgical area. The room was tense, filled only with the clink of metal instruments and Emily's labored breathing. Emily lay on the stretcher, eyes closed, her face pale with pain and exhaustion. Despite her fragile appearance, she showed all the signs of a woman in labor. "The patient's vitals are stable for now," a nurse reported, breaking the tense silence. Dr. Thomas nodded, slipping on sterile gloves. "Good. Let's begin," he said, his voice remarkably calm. As he made the first precise incision, he noticed something extraordinary. Emily's internal organs, once exposed, were clearly those of a fully developed woman in her 20s, not a child. "Unbelievable," he muttered, loud enough for nearby assistants to hear. Though the surgical team was too focused to dwell on his remark, head nurse Mary, assisting directly, couldn't help but ask, "What's wrong, doctor?" Thomas glanced at her, his eyes reflecting rare astonishment. "This girl's organs are completely normal for a woman in her late 20s, he said, still incredulous. "There's no sign she should look like she does." The team continued in silence, processing the shocking information while focusing on safely delivering the baby. After tense, breathless minutes, Dr. Thomas carefully lifted the baby from Emily's womb. A clear, strong cry filled the room, the most miraculous sound, dispelling the tension. Relief washed over everyone present. "It's a healthy boy," Thomas announced, his voice tinged with joy. He held the red, wriggling newborn for Emily to see briefly before the nurses took him for cleaning and initial checks. Despite her exhaustion, Emily managed a weak smile upon seeing her son. After ensuring the baby was stable, Thomas focused back on Emily, meticulously completing the surgery to avoid complications. When Emily was moved to the recovery room, Thomas removed his gloves and mask, his face still deep in thought. The surgery was a success. Mother and child were safe, but what he had witnessed remained a mystery. "We need to investigate this case further," he told the team. "This is an extremely rare medical condition." He knew that beyond saving lives, his duty as a doctor was to research and explain complex medical phenomena, and Emily's case would surely keep him and his colleagues pondering. Hours after the intense surgery, Emily slowly woke in the recovery room. Her eyelids fluttered, adjusting to the soft room's light. The pain from the incision lingered, but a strange sense of relief spread through her. Beside her bed, a kind nurse held a tiny baby wrapped in a soft blanket. "Emily, you're awake?" Nurse Anna smiled gently. "Here's your son, healthy and adorable." She placed the baby, Ben, in Emily's arms. "Want to hold him?" Emily nodded weakly, tears welling up as she held her son for the first time. A profound, sacred emotion surged within her. The baby stirred lightly, his tiny lips seeking his mother's warmth. All pain and fatigue seemed to vanish. Thank you," Emily whispered, her voice breaking with emotion. She gazed at her son's angelic face, feeling his steady breaths. This was the greatest gift life had given her, the motivation to overcome all hardships. Nurse Anna smiled, quietly, watching the joyful moment. After a while, she spoke softly. "Emily, we need to discuss your health. Dr. Thomas needs more details to ensure the best care for you." Emily nodded, knowing this moment would come. "Yes, I understand. I'm ready to explain everything." Just then, Dr. Thomas entered, his face still serious from the extraordinary surgery, but softer as he saw Emily and Ben. He sat by the bed. "Hello, Emily?" he began cautiously. "The surgery was successful, but we noticed your internal organs are fully developed, like those of an adult woman, while your appearance is childlike. Can you explain this to help us understand your condition?" Emily adjusted her position, holding her son closer. Taking a deep breath, she spoke calmly but firmly. "Doctor, I have a rare condition called congenital hypopituitarism. It affects my pituitary gland, preventing my body from developing physically." Thomas nodded slowly as the pieces fell into place. "This explains a lot," he said. "But for a complete medical record, we'll need to contact your previous doctors and gather all relevant information." Emily looked at her son, then back at Thomas. "I understand, doctor. I'll cooperate and provide everything I can." At that moment, Nurse Anna rushed in, looking worried. "Dr. Thomas, you need to know something. Paul, who brought Emily here, has been arrested. They're charging him with a serious crime." The news hit Emily like a thunderbolt, shattering her world. "No, it's a misunderstanding," she cried, her voice desperate and panicked. "Paul is my student. He did nothing wrong. He saved me by bringing me here." Tears streamed down her face, now from fear and worry for her savior. She couldn't let Paul suffer unjustly. Thomas stood abruptly, his face stern. "I'll speak to the authorities immediately. We need to clear this up now." He knew that, with medical evidence and Emily's testimony, the truth would soon emerge. The following hours were a mix of anxiety and tense waiting. Emily answered additional questions from nurses and doctors, while Thomas contacted Emily's former doctors to gather her medical records and proof of her condition. Finally, Thomas met with Captain Michael, the lead investigator, in a private hospital room. "Captain, I need to discuss Paul's case," Thomas began urgently. "I'm listening," Michael replied, his face impassive. "Paul isn't a criminal," Thomas asserted. "Emily, the woman he brought here, is his English teacher with a rare medical condition affecting her physical development." He handed Michael a file with medical documents, including recent hospital findings. Michael carefully reviewed them, his expression softening. "I understand, doctor," he said after a pause. "This is indeed unusual. We'll do everything to clarify this and ensure justice. We'll release Paul immediately, but the investigation will continue to complete the case." In the recovery room, Emily held her son tightly, praying for a swift resolution. Finally, Thomas returned with a relieved expression. "Emily, good news," he said gently. "Captain Michael reviewed the documents and agreed to release Paul. Everything will be fine." Emily exhaled, tears of happiness streaming down her cheeks. "Thank you, doctor. Thank you for everything." Just then, Paul was escorted back to the room by 2 officers. His face showed the strain and exhaustion of hours in custody, but it lit up when he saw Emily and her baby. "Emily," he whispered, rushing to her bedside. "Are you okay?" Emily looked up, her eyes filled with gratitude and emotion. "I'm fine, Paul. Thank you for saving me that night." In that moment, the misunderstandings and pain faded, leaving only warmth and the start of a new hopeful chapter. In the days that followed, in the warm hospital room still tinged with the smell of antiseptic, Emily gradually recovered. Baby Ben, her little angel, nursed and slept peacefully, occasionally crying for his mother. Paul stayed by their side, putting work aside to care for Emily in every way, feeding her, giving her medicine, and even changing Ben's diapers, though clumsily. His dedication touched Emily deeply and earned quiet admiration from the hospital staff. One afternoon, as Ben slept beside her, Emily turned to Paul, who was peeling an apple for her, her expression thoughtful. "Paul, you've probably noticed I haven't been as enthusiastic about teaching you English lately, have I?" Paul paused, smiling gently. I just thought you were tired from the pregnancy. You need more rest." Emily shook her head, a trace of sadness in her eyes. "It's not just that," she said, her voice trembling. "I've been exhausted by everything that's happened." She took a deep breath for courage. The man I loved for so long, the one I thought I'd build a family with. Her voice broke, tears rolling down her cheeks. "He abandoned me and our child." Paul froze, the knife and apple nearly slipping from his hands. He couldn't believe what he heard. How could the fiancée Emily had spoken of with quiet joy be so heartless? "His family never accepted me because of my unusual appearance," Emily continued, stifling sobs. "They always saw me as a child, nothing more. They feared gossip and judgment, and he couldn't handle the pressure. He ended our relationship, cut all contact, and didn't even ask about his own child." Her words cut into Paul like knives. He felt a surge of anger, not for himself, but for the strong yet fragile woman before him. He set the apple down and pulled his chair closer, gently touching her trembling hand. "Emily, I can't imagine how terrible this has been for you," he said sincerely, his voice full of empathy and sorrow. "To me, you've never seemed unusual. I see a beautiful, intelligent, talented, and kind woman." His words were heartfelt, reflecting what he'd felt since Emily began teaching him. "You've taught me so much, and I know many people admire and respect you." The room fell quiet, filled only with Ben's soft breathing and Emily's stifled sobs. Paul let her cry, letting her release her pent-up emotions. When she calmed, he hesitated, then spoke with a mix of sincerity and nervousness. "Emily, if I may, could you give me a chance to care for you and Ben?" Emily looked up, her red eyes wide with surprise. Paul took a deep breath, summoning his courage. "The truth is, I've liked you for a long time, but I knew you had a fiancé, so I kept my feelings hidden, never crossing the line." He looked into her eyes, his gaze full of sincerity. "I can't promise much, but I promise to do everything in my heart to bring you and Ben happiness. I don't care about your appearance or what others say. All I care about is your smile and peace." Emily was stunned by his unexpected, heartfelt confession. She looked at the man who had stood by her through the darkest times, facing danger and misunderstanding to protect her. She saw the sincerity in his eyes and felt the warmth of his hand holding hers. After all the pain and loss, perhaps this was the safe haven fate had prepared for her. A gentle, serene smile spread across her face. She said nothing, only nodded, tears falling again, this time from gratitude and hope. And so, amidst the hospital walls, amid the worries and challenges, a new love began to blossom. Emily and Paul, two people who had faced unimaginable trials together, found in each other empathy, support, and faith in the future. They knew the road ahead might still be thorny, but together, they had the strength to overcome anything. Their love wasn't loud or ostentatious, but was sincere and profound enough to warm hearts that had endured much pain. Baby Ben, like an invisible thread, deepened their bond and gave it meaning. The days at Peaceful Haven Hospital passed with the devoted care of the medical staff and Paul's unwavering presence. The story of Emily, a woman with a childlike appearance who gave birth to a healthy boy, spread through the hospital, sparking curiosity and deep empathy from staff and patients alike. But beyond the medical anomaly, it was Paul's love and dedication to Emily and Ben that touched everyone's hearts. Each day, Paul was by Emily's side, helping with the smallest tasks, supporting her to sit up, feeding her spoonfuls of porridge, and soothing Ben when he cried. His hands, used to writing, now gently cared for the tiny baby. Emily watched him, filled with happiness and gratitude, feeling fortunate to have found such a steadfast partner amid life's storms. The nurses, accustomed to all sorts of situations, couldn't help but feel a touch of affectionate envy at Paul's devotion. Nurse Anna, who had been with Emily from the start, brought meals with a warm smile. "Here's oatmeal, fresh orange juice, and some fruit, Emily," she said cheerfully, placing the tray by the bed. "Thank you so much, Anna," Emily replied, sitting up weakly, but with heartfelt gratitude. "Everyone here has been so kind to me." Anna nodded, adjusting Emily's pillow for comfort. "It's our job, Emily. Your case is special, and your resilience inspires us." Looking at Paul, who was gazing at Ben, she added, "Paul is truly a wonderful husband and father. Caring for his wife and child like this is rare." Paul smiled, his eyes shining with pride. "Thank you, Anna. I'll do anything for my little family." Nurse Lily, a younger nurse, also took notice of this special family. After helping Emily walk short distances in the room, she shyly approached. "Paul, Emily, I hope I'm not intruding, but I just want to say everyone in the ward talks about you," she said, her voice full of admiration. "The way Paul cares for Emily and Ben is truly inspiring. It warms our hearts and restores our faith in life's goodness." Paul smiled, gently holding Emily's hand. "Thank you, Lily. I'm just doing what any man would for the woman he loves." Emily's eyes welled up. "You're the most wonderful man, Paul. I don't know where I'd be without you." Lily nodded, visibly moved. "You two are an admirable couple. I wish Emily a speedy recovery, so your family can go home and enjoy a happy life together." Their love touched not only the nurses, but also other patients. One afternoon, as Paul helped Emily walk the hospital corridor for exercise, an elderly patient, Mrs. Anderson, approached. "Sorry to bother you," she said with a kind smile. "I just want to say you've inspired me greatly." She looked at them warmly. "Seeing your love and care for each other is beautiful. It reminds me of my youth." "Thank you, ma'am," Emily replied, leaning on Paul's arm. "We've been through a lot, and we're so lucky to have each other." Mrs. Anderson nodded, her eyes understanding. "That's what matters most. Love and family are the most precious things in life." Even Dr. Thomas, who performed Emily's surgery and closely monitored her recovery, was deeply impressed by their bond. Reviewing her chart one afternoon, he said, "Paul, Emily, I'm truly impressed by how you faced this difficult situation together. Your love and dedication are admirable." "Thank you so much, Doctor," Paul replied as Emily nodded. "We're grateful for your help and everyone at the hospital." Thomas smiled, closing the chart. "Helping a strong, united family like yours is an honor. Emily's recovery is progressing well. With a bit more time and care, she'll be ready to go home." His words brought hope and relief to Emily and Paul. They knew the road to full recovery was still ahead, but they faced it with determination and the unwavering support of those around them. Their love, like a warm flame, not only warmed them, but also spread to those nearby, turning the cold hospital into a place of compassion and humanity. After weeks of treatment and recovery at Peaceful Haven Hospital, the day finally came for Emily and Ben to return home. That morning, the sky was clear, and golden sunlight signaled a beautiful new beginning for the young family. The hospital room buzzed with preparation, mixed with joy and a touch of reluctance to leave the caring staff. Paul carefully packed the last items, having prepared everything the night before: clothes for Emily and Ben, and baby essentials. Emily sat on the bed, holding Ben, whose chubby cheeks and curious black eyes took in the world with childlike wonder. Her eyes glowed with happiness and relief. She was finally bringing her son home to start a new life. Nurse Anna, Nurse Lily, and Dr. Thomas came to say goodbye, offering warm hugs and well wishes. Take care of yourself and call us if you need anything, Anna advised. Thomas smiled kindly. Congratulations to your family. May all the best things come your way. Paul gently wheeled Emily out of the room. Ben nestled in her arms. As they reached the hospital's main entrance, a surprising scene awaited. A crowd of reporters and photographers stood ready, cameras flashing, microphones extended. Their extraordinary story had captured the media's attention. Paul, Emily, how do you feel about going home? A reporter called out. Paul paused, one hand on the wheelchair, the other gently holding Emily's for reassurance. He looked at her, then smiled calmly at the cameras. We feel incredibly fortunate and grateful, he said warmly. The love and support from the doctors, nurses, family, friends, and even strangers have given us the strength to overcome everything. Emily, can you share your hospital experience? Another reporter asked, holding out a microphone. Emily smiled, her eyes reflecting deep gratitude. Though slightly flustered by the attention, she remained composed. It was a challenging journey, she said clearly. But we had an amazing team of doctors and nurses who cared for us tirelessly. And most importantly, I had my wonderful partner by my side. She looked at Paul lovingly. I'm so grateful for all the love and care we've received. The reporters pressed for more, but Emily and Paul remained calm and polite, sharing just enough to convey their message of resilience, love, and gratitude without delving into private details. They hoped their story would inspire faith and hope in others facing hardships. With help from hospital security, Paul got Emily and Ben to the car. As it pulled away, leaving behind the flashing cameras and noise, Emily sighed, resting her head on Paul's shoulder. I didn't expect so much attention, she said. Paul squeezed her hand, smiling. Our story is special, my love, but what matters is we're going home. Their modest home welcomed them with warmth and familiarity. Paul had tidied it meticulously, adding a cute crib and playful baby toys. The house felt peaceful, a stark contrast to the hospital's chaos. Their first days home revolved around Ben. Emily, though still weak, insisted on caring for him herself. Paul balanced work with helping her, and their home came alive with laughter and a baby's cries. They learned to be parents, sometimes clumsily, but their moments of joy were overwhelming, watching Ben sleep or smile for the first time. The early challenges faded, replaced by the simple joys of family life. Emily and Paul's story, with its seemingly insurmountable obstacles and love's triumph over prejudice and adversity, inspired many in their community. People spoke of them as proof that true love could overcome any barrier, that extraordinary resilience could defy fate. Occasionally, articles revisited their story, reminding everyone of life's goodness, the power of humanity, and its miracles. Emily and Paul didn't seek fame. They quietly lived their lives, nurturing their small family, their love naturally spreading humane values to those around them. Years passed like a beautiful dream. Emily, Paul, and their son Ben now lived a stable, happy life. Their modest home, though not lavish, was filled with laughter and love. The storms, misunderstandings, and pains of the past had faded, replaced by daily peace and joy. One serene summer afternoon, golden sunlight spilled across their small front yard. Emily and Paul sat together on a wooden bench, watching 6-year-old Ben play lively in the garden, chasing butterflies with gleeful laughter. The setting sun cast a golden glow on Ben's soft hair, painting long, peaceful shadows of his parents on the old brick path. The air was tranquil. Emily leaned her head on Paul's shoulder, feeling his familiar warmth and strength. "Look at our boy," she whispered, her voice full of pride and love. "Time flies. Just yesterday he was a tiny baby in my arms, and now he's running all over. Paul smiled, wrapping an arm around her, his eyes fixed on Ben's playful figure. "He's growing so fast," he said, then added playfully, "I think Ben might need a sibling to play with. What do you think?" Emily looked up, her eyes sparkling, a happy smile spreading. "I was thinking the same, love," she said, her voice touched with emotion. "Being your wife, the mother of our child, that's the most wonderful thing I've ever had." She squeezed his hand. "Finding a man who truly loves me and our son, who doesn't care about my unusual appearance. You're 1 in a million, you know?" Tears glistened in her eyes, tears of complete happiness. "I feel so lucky, so incredibly lucky." "I love you, Emily," Paul said, his voice warm and sincere, gently wiping a tear from her cheek. "We've been through so much, moments when we thought we'd fall, but everyone was worth it. I'm grateful for you and Ben." "And I'm grateful for you, Paul," Emily replied, her voice choked. "Your love and support are my greatest strength. I don't know where I'd be without you." Paul kissed her forehead tenderly. "I'll always be here for you, for our family. No matter what lies ahead, together we can face anything." Just then, Ben ran toward them, his face beaming with a mischievous smile, holding a grasshopper he'd caught. "Dad, Mom, look what I got," he shouted proudly, waving his prize. Emily and Paul laughed at his innocent joy. "Great job, Ben," Paul said, ruffling his son's hair. "You're quite the little explorer." The family gathered on the porch, savoring the peaceful, joyful moment. The sun dipped behind the trees, leaving streaks of orange and pink across the sky. Crickets began chirping in the garden, signaling another calm evening. Emily and Paul's story, from harsh misunderstandings and trials to a beautiful ending, stood as a testament to human love and resilience. They not only found happiness for themselves, but also inspired hope and faith in goodness for all who knew their story. Surrounded by their son's love and each other's unwavering support, Emily and Paul looked to the future with hope and confidence. They knew that together, they could face any challenge and cherish every precious moment of life. For true love is the most miraculous force, capable of healing all wounds and creating extraordinary things. Thank you for following this story. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories. Goodbye, and see you next time.